Assalamualaikum and very good afternoon. I bid to Madam Shem. Today, I would like to explain about the lock and key hypothesis. We know that the active site is where the chemical reactions occur. But, how do reactions occur exactly? Let us look at the first model of enzymatic action. The lock and key idea comes from treating the enzyme as a lock and a substrate as a key. Only the right key can unlock the lock, just as how your house key can open your neighbor's door for a good reason. This explains the specificity of enzyme to their respective substrate. The main point of this hypothesis is that the structure of the active site, which is the keyhole, remains the same throughout the enzymatic action reaction, and the key must hence be perfectly complementary to the lock. So that is why the lock unlocks and the enzymatic reaction happens. When the enzyme and substrate collide in the correct orientation binding occurs, and an enzyme-substrate complex is formed. The reaction occurs and the molecules within the active site are rearranged to form products. The products will actually have a different structure from that other substrate, since the products no longer fit in the active site. Due to the change in 3D conformation, they are released from the enzyme and the active site is available once again to bind to other substrate molecules. I think that's all from me. Stay safe and have a nice day, madam. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. Today, I will be sharing about the lock and key hypothesis. First of all, we know that most enzymes are complex proteins made up of polypeptide chains that are folded into three-dimensional structures. This three-dimensional structure has an active site with a specific configuration that complement a specific substrate molecule. The binding of a molecule substrate on an active site of enzyme is specific like lock and key combination. This is the example. The enzyme will present the lock and the substrate will present the key. First step is the specific substrate will approach the enzyme like this. Next one, the substrate combine with the active site to form enzyme substrate complex like this. In the last step, a reaction takes place and produce end product is created. These are the product. The product then leave the active site after the reaction complete. Most reactions inside the cell require high activation energy. The activation energy is the energy needed to break the bond in the substrate molecule. Before reaction can occur, enzyme function by lowering the activation energy. This is the presence of enzyme will reduce the activation energy of reaction. By doing so, the rate of biochemical reaction in the cell is accelerated. I give you example. This is sucrase and sucrose, and this is lipid and lipase. So, sucrose can only bind with sucrase enzyme. Meanwhile, lipid can only bind with lipase through the active site. They will produce the enzyme substrate complex. These are the example of enzyme substrate complex. the reaction will occur and producing the product. So, the active site can be used over and over again with specific substrate. The conclusion is the presence of enzyme will reduce the activation energy and increase the enzyme reaction. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum and a very good evening. I be to Madam Shem. Today, I would like to represent about the lock and key hypothesis. The lock and key hypothesis. So, what is enzyme? Enzyme is a protein molecules and made up of amino acid. What is the function of enzyme? Enzyme acts as a biological catalyst. It means that it functions to speed up biological reaction in the cell but remain unchanged at the end of the reaction. The mechanism of enzyme action is lock and key hypothesis. Enzyme will react as the lock because it has very size shape known as active site. Substrate will act as a key. Substrate must have a shape complementary to the active site so that it will fix into the active site. The correct key can fit into the keyhole of the lock. It means the enzyme specifically react with only one or only few similar compounds. Once the substrate is attached to enzyme, the whole thing just becomes the enzyme-substrate complex. The reaction will happen and the bonds in the substrate molecules up. Once the bonds are broken, the product will form. The product will no longer fit into the active site and they will escape into the surrounding medium by leaving the active site. So the active site will receive the other substrate molecules again. So you can see here the structure of enzyme molecules still remain unchanged and still can bind with other substrate molecules for other reaction. And that we can conclude lock and key model in an enzyme action. That's all from me. Thank you.